so as Lyssa had mentioned, we did get to see It Ain't Over, which is the documentary about Yogi Berra and his life. That was released in theaters last week, and some of us didn't even realize it was like, coming out, honestly, because I just feel like there wasn't a ton of promotion until like the week leading up to it, and that was it. Like that's when I kind of feel like the promotional push went in, and I get it, like they're not expecting this to be some like Marvel Studios blockbuster or something like that. Like it's a documentary, and that's cool. But I just felt like they could have had a little bit more promotion out there for it. But nonetheless, we did get to see it Friday, which actually was Yogi's birthday.
It was. He would have been 98.
Yeah, no, which was it was awesome. So I'm really glad we got to see that. We got to check it out in the Lower East Side, in a Regal Essex Crossing over there. Beautiful theater.
Very nice theater. Very nice theater.
Yeah, if you're in New York, you should definitely go check that out because that theater was pretty darn nice. It was the first time I've been there, and definitely plan on going back there because it was really cool. So, but as far as the film goes, it was really well done. I really enjoyed it. Lyssa mentioned that we had some laughs. There was some tear-jerking moments that are in there as well. Some real, like, there's a lot of heart to it. But I love the fact of the beginning and end of it, where it comes from, because it feels like it comes from a place like with his granddaughter, who was probably the one that looked like she kind of like took the lead and the reins on this thing.
Yeah,
and Lindsay Berra, who also has a lot to do with her with the Yogi Berra Museum in New Jersey, which we've talked about going to check out finally because we haven't had a chance to check that out. So maybe perhaps this summer we'll go ahead and make that happen. This shirt is actually a baseballism shirt from the Yogi Berra Museum. You can order it online.
Nice.
So I love the fact that it comes from a place where it is showcasing Yogi as a player on the field, because and Lyssa, we've talked about Yogi before, and I really just feel like this is something that I've felt strongly about for a while. That I feel like he's highly underrated as a baseball player at this point in time because of his personality was so big that it took over and superseded him as an actual player. But when you look at him as a player, he was a monster. Like, I mean, he was a excellent ball player, and I feel like that just gets overlooked a lot. But this movie, it really shines the light on that. Besides it showcases his whole life. It's not just his on the field, but the beginning and end of it very much drive home the fact that, listen, don't forget that Yogi was a great baseball player and one of the most successful runs in Yankee history. So, Lyssa, what were your overall thoughts on the film?
So I don't know if you noticed during the movie, I was taking notes the entire movie because I didn't want to forget anything that stood out to me, and I ended up taking what amounts to like 3 pages of notes in my phone. But there were some things I knew. I knew that he was in the Navy. I knew that he served in World War II. There was one thing that I knew about him that they didn't mention, or it was like so quick you missed it, about him owning the bowling alley. I had read that. But the things I didn't know, I knew he was, like 10 rings. Didn't know he was the MVP 3 times. I did not know that. I knew he was a good player. But I didn't know some of the things that made him a really extraordinary player that, like, it's really hard to teach or copy that. Which one of his quotes that I love was about something about if you can't imitate him, don't copy him, or something like that, or it might be the reverse of that. But one of the things that they said very early on was that his unconventional hitting style was because he had big hands and a quick bat swing. And he said, if you pay close attention, a pitcher gives you his tells, right? So maybe if he's throwing a fastball, he leans in towards the catcher a little bit more. Or, like just something about like you can't always see the way he's holding the ball until it gets thrown. But something about his mannerism will give you a clue to the pitch that he's about to pitch.
He would pick up on pitch tipping quite a bit.
Yeah. And he did that with batters too. He talked about like he would analyze the batters. He would try to psych them out. He would talk to them about things while they were in the batter's box, which I love. So he was such a smart and calculated and attentive player. And I think that's the part of him that gets very underrated. And the fact that when he stopped playing and he, got into like a managing and coaching role, every team that he worked with seemed to improve drastically.
Yeah. No, he definitely did. And unfortunately, the one where he kind of got the short end of the stick is when he came back and managed the Yankees in the mid-'80s, which, that was during George's heyday of, firing people left and right. So
on a whim, yeah. And I don't blame him, and I respect a grudge holder for that long. I'm a grudge holder. I'm Puerto Rican, it's part of my blood. So for him to hold a grudge for as long as he did with George Steinbrenner, I think was well deserved, first of all, because he was right. George should have at least done it in person. I can't believe he sent like an assistant to the assistant to fire him after only 16 games. That's ridiculous. Talk about morale killer on the team.
yeah.
I don't understand the rationale around that. And then for George, like I from what I understand, like Susan Waldman was the one that kind of was like for George to wait that long and be that proud, I don't know. That was far too long. And then when he came back, he was. I mean, he's been beloved since he first became a Yankee. And you cannot underestimate the boost to a team that somebody like him can provide just because of who you are as a human being, let alone one of the greatest Yankees ever.
Yeah, well, during George's, I'll say heyday during the '80s and stuff like that. Also actually the whole Yankee fans' relationship with George Steinbrenner is also very interesting because at this point in time, a lot of people, I mean, yes, he's passed away, and sometimes after someone passes, their time gets very romanticized, if we're being completely honest, over time, and the bad things kind of get glossed over. But if we're calling it how it was, George was extremely erratic, and he was the one who was extremely stubborn and would fire and was impatient, and he fired Yogi off a whim. And yeah, I kind of respect him saying, screw it, I'm not going back there. And while George is still the owner, and Susan Waldman is the one who goes ahead and kind of got the ball rolling and got them to apologize. And the apology happened like immediately at that point once they got in person. Because Yogi didn't want to do this thing, but he was like, a proud man also. I was like, screw it, I'm gonna. Both guys were standing their ground right there.
The difference is one of them did it with integrity.
I agreed.
The other did not.
No, agreed. But that's what I think it was. It became more of like a pissing contest in some ways at that point. As far as what George goes, like George was just like, screw it, I'm not giving in. Not really Yogi's, but from George's half, it became a pissing contest. And it was just like, all right, well, if Yogi doesn't want to come back here, then screw it. I'm not going to have him back here. And we're going to see who blinks first. And then thankfully it did get, fixed up and everything. And it is incredible that on Yogi Berra Day, when he did come back, that's when David Cohen in 1999 threw his perfect game. And it was like the first pitch with Don Larson. Like, you can't make that stuff up. Like, you couldn't. If people didn't witness that actually happen and that was submitted in a movie script, they would be like, no, we can't do that. No one's going to buy it.
So Joe Girardi, I think, like always, it was like easy to cry, right? Like very emotional, very in tune guy. But he started tearing up at one point when he was talking about that game, David Cohen's game, because he asked Yogi, "Would you bless my glove and use it when Don Larson throws out the first pitch to you?" And then that happened. Yeah. I also like that. I don't know who it was. I think it was like one of the writers from that said it, but they said Don Larson's always the one that's credited with the game, but Don Larson would have told you it was Yogi. Like, he never shook Yogi off. Every pitch Yogi called, he threw.
And that's what I think a lot of people, it's funny that you mention it, because it's true. During a lot of perfect games, no hitters and things like that, or even a successful start, the pitcher gets credit. Oh, this was David Wells' perfect game, David Cohen's perfect game, Doc Gooden's no hitter. The catcher has just as much to do with it as the pitcher does.
Absolutely.
They're the ones calling the game. So I think, it's more in tune baseball fans will say, like, hey, it was them together. And the pitcher is the first one that usually says it.
Yeah.
Like in the post game, like immediately, like, hey, listen, whatever Girardi wanted to throw down, I mean, I was there. Whatever Yogi wanted to put down, I would just follow his lead. And it's important. And Yogi as a catcher, it was tremendous. And the fact that he was able to put up the offensive numbers that he did while mostly playing catcher, because he did end up playing left field and stuff like that in various other positions later on when he needed to. But as a catcher, the fact that you can put up those numbers was insane.
Yes, there was, I can't remember what season it was, and I'm not going to go looking for it now, but there was one season where he had like 24 strikeouts, in a season.
Yeah.
Come on. And as a catcher, he had 148 consecutive games without an error. I mean, those types, and he caught 117 double headers in his career. Do you know how hard it is just to play catcher for 117 games, let alone 117 double headers?
And
as far as I know, he didn't have any of the health issues that a lot of other catchers have when they get older.
Well, Yogi would tell you that he was lower to the ground.
So. He was short. Yeah. Oh my God, I love when he said that.
So Yogi's stat line, by the way, just to bring more awareness to this. So he had, for those with the advanced metrics, he had a WAR of 59.5 and 7,555 at bats. He had 2,150 hits, 358 home runs, a career average of 285, 1,175 runs scored, 1,430 RBIs, 30 stolen bases with an on-base percentage of 348, slugging percentage of 482, and an OPS of 830. And again, for more advanced metrics, an OPS plus of 125. So you had mentioned 3-time MVP, Hall of Famer, 10-time World Series champion, 18-time All-Star. So, I mean, the resume speaks for itself. And he definitely should have been, or they should have expanded that greatest living ball player thing that kind of got the ball rolling to 5. And Yogi should have been right there with, Johnny Bench and Sandy Koufax and Willie Mays. So it really, really needed to be there. So I'm extremely happy that this has been brought to the forefront and gotten back out there, because I mean, he's highly underappreciated. I actually kind of felt in some ways that Lou Gehrig kind of gets some of that as well, because it's like, oh, you played with Babe Ruth, and it's like, you were kind of like the two guy. When you look at Lou Gehrig's stats, his are pretty outstanding, obviously, as well. One of the greatest ball players to ever live, but so is Yogi Berra. So
yeah, absolutely. So the part that made me cry, which Ed knows, was when they were talking about his relationship with his wife Carmen and their family, and most specifically, I knew he died. I knew he died several years ago, so that wasn't no spoiler there. But when they talked about kind of his last, his last months, and his wife died before him, and all of his kids swore that he was the one that was going to go first. The things that he said to her on her last day, like it was like perfectly like a Yogi thing to say, and he made her laugh, and she went peacefully that evening, it sounds like. And then he passed as well, but it sounds like, had such a beautiful marriage. I'm sure there were obviously ups and downs, which is in any relationship, but like they had a marriage of respect, love, and fun, it seems. 3 sons and I think 11 grandkids, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, clearly one of his granddaughters is the one who, fought for this documentary. She fought for him to get the Presidential Medal of Honor, which he finally ended up getting post-mortem. I think that says a lot about who he is as a human being as well. Very loved and adored by his family, loved and adored by the nation. I love what he said. I'm trying to quickly find it about his yogi-isms. Oh, the one thing I did not know was that he has 8 quotes in like this book of quotes of famous people, which is the most by an American. Which I thought was really cute. But I think a mental health professional that was briefly on it said yogi is the definition of complexity, which is taking something complex and making it sound simple. And Derek Jeter says something about it as well. Derek Jeter said, like Yogi would tell you, if it looks good, swing at it. And it always looked good to me, so I don't know what to tell you. For him, he had a better view. Think about it. Think about Yogi Berra compared to Aaron Judge and the view that both of them get, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Yogi Berra's view is much shorter and closer to the strike zone. So basically, everything in his view is hittable, and that to me makes a lot of sense. And then what I love one of his quotes that he said, "You can't think and hit the ball. I can't." He said, "I can't think and hit the ball at the same time." I don't know. If you think about that, yeah, like
no, it's true. It's absolutely true because like if you're thinking about when you go to hit him, you're thinking about your mechanics and you're thinking about 6,000 different things. It's kind of what he's saying. Just simplify it. See the ball, hit the ball, and that's it. And it's true. You can work on a bunch of stuff before, but you can't do that while you're hitting. I mean, you just need to narrow it down to like one thing and that's it. So they all do make sense. Like when you really think about it, it's just simplifying it. And I do love the fact in the documentary where they'll have like
Confucius or
and all this other stuff, and they'll have the yogi version of it underneath. And it's like, it is the same thing.
Same thing, just a lot easier to understand that way.
Absolutely. So that was another thing I loved that they did here. And you're right, learning more about his personal life was really interesting. And he even said too, like you had mentioned, he was in Battle of Normandy, where it was just like, hey, like baseball's not hard. War, that's hard. Baseball's not hard. Baseball's fun.
Yeah.
So it's true though, but that puts it into perspective.
It does. And I want to say this too. I think the mindset that he had is the reason why he lived such a long life too. Like I think it seems like, obviously we don't know everything, but it seems like he didn't really stress out over things.
No.
And I feel like when you live that way, and I'll be the first to admit it's hard to live that way. I'm not saying I do. But when you live that way, when you don't get stressed out about every little thing, especially things that we don't have control over, you're probably going to live a lot longer. Whether you smoke, drink, eat really bad food, you'll probably live longer just because you're not sweating all the small stuff. And I feel like that's kind of him personified. He didn't sweat the small stuff at all. And he found something nice or fun to say about everything.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess with closing this part is just, if you're a Yankees fan, if you're a baseball fan in general, you should definitely go ahead and I would highly recommend this. Go check it out. Catch it in the theater. I always will advocate, see it in the theater. It's I don't know. I just, as also a movie lover, I just feel like the theatrical experience does add more to it. So check it out while it's in its theatrical run. If you can, for whatever reason, I'm sure it'll probably be on Amazon Prime and everything else,
or eventually on the
yeah, or wherever it is, because I think it's Sony Pictures, and they don't really have their own streamer. So my guess is Amazon Prime will probably have it, at some point, probably in another month or two or something like that. But
it was definitely worth it. So worth it. It was so much more than just baseball. And for a certain Met fan out there that likes to tune into our show, they talk about the Mets too.
Yes, because they tell Yogi's whole story. So,
Correct.
The Mets are a part of it. The Mets are a part of his story as well. So, yeah, highly recommend. 2 thumbs up.
I was just going to say, how many stars? How many stars, Ed?
There you go. For documentary-wise, I would say 4.5 stars. It's a really good documentary. Like, again, not a movie. There's no actors in it, or no one's playing Yogi Berra. Documentary. So, check that out. From you, same thing. Two thumbs up or whatever it is.
2 thumbs up. Three steps up in a C formation for all of you Living Color fans. Yeah, 4.5 stars too. I agree. I thought it was very heartwarming and charming, and it left me feeling very happy, even though I was crying in the end, and both you and Joe had to check in on me.
Yeah, I noticed it. I picked up on it.
Yeah, but it was a happy cry. It was a very happy cry because I felt so connected, and I can't wait to go to the museum,
Yeah.
and check out all the other things that they have there. So, and the other fun fact: one of his nieces runs a bed and breakfast in his childhood home.
Yes, that's right.
Pretty cool too.
That's right. When I was in one of the times I went to Baltimore, they have it's not a bed and breakfast, but they have Babe Ruth's childhood home as a museum because he was grew up in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And it's in walking distance from Camden Yards. So
Yeah.
another one to check out with that. But yeah, I would like to go ahead and check all of that stuff out. Next time I'm in Missouri, which does happen.
It does happen for you. It does happen
for me. It does happen for me. So I have to make that a stop there. All right. So that takes us to the current Yankees.